But not everyone does, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Dennis Gaiman, and this is our business here, Gaiman Custom Remodeling. Thank you very much for coming. Tonight, it's not all about us, about Gaiman. This workshop is put on by the Pottstown Building Industries Exchange. There's a committee that we began a year and a half ago, maybe not quite it's called the Green Team. And our focus there is those of us involved in building trades that have a particular interest in green, in energy efficiency, environmentalism, and that kind of thing. And we've been putting on these seminars, workshops, it depends which day you ask us as to what we call it, probably about once a quarter. I think this is the fourth one that we've done now, and most of them have been in the Pottstown area, and I said that we'd love to have everybody come to us, and so that's why we have it here tonight. But as you've heard, the topic tonight is going to be about heating. And what I'm going to do is to give a very general overview of different types of heating. There are a number of BIE members here tonight who work in the heating business for a living. That's their vocation, their profession. And so after I've given you this general overview, we're going to open it up for questions. And I'm not the heating expert. Certainly as part of remodeling, we get involved with heating at times, but oftentimes we do invite a trade specialist, a trade contractor to come in and help us out with that. So we'll refer those questions maybe to other people who can better answer them. And we're not looking to drag this out, but we want you to feel like you got time to get your questions answered. Those of you that are here, with your business hat on, feel free to hand out brochures or business cards, that kind of thing, and make contacts as you would like. I have a checklist that I'll hand out afterwards, but it's going to be my cheat sheet for right now, and you'll be welcome to take that along. I'm going to begin by talking about fuel types, and that is narrowed down pretty easily. We have the traditional ones of wood and coal, and kind of along those veins of lines more recently, that's somebody decided, well, if we can burn wood, we can make pellets out of it, and maybe that's more efficient. And somebody said, well, pellets are kind of the shape and size of corn, so we can burn corn. And so you have those kind of components. Certainly there's fuel oil, and then we have the gases, which would be natural gas and propane. Depending where you live, you may not have access to natural gas. It's not typically in a rural area, but then the propane truck can come and deliver, and depends who you talk to there, they'll tell you one's better than the other. But there are ratings for each of these different kinds of fuels as far as BTUs, and BTUs is a measurement that the heating industry has come up with, I guess as well as the cooling industry, but for measuring how much heat you get out of a certain fuel. And maybe before I get off on that, the last one that I didn't mention yet is electricity. And almost all of these use some electricity for whether it's for helping them ignite or helping for distribution. And then within each of these, there's a number of different ways for that heat to be distributed. I'll start at the top of my sheet, and these aren't in any particular order other than that's how I typed them out or wrote them down initially. Electricity. We all know that you can buy a little electric space heater and plug that in. Many times that heat is usually a resistance heat. There's the electricity that's going through the wires and the elements, and as it's doing that, it's encountering some resistance, and just like if you rub your hands together or two sticks together, it creates friction, resistance, and that creates heat. Traditionally an electric baseboard heat that you would see in your home, that would be a type of resistance heat. Along with electricity, you have heat pumps, which came out probably the late 60s, early 70s. A heat pump is gathering heat there's a couple different kinds of heat pumps, but most traditionally it's been an air source. It's gathering heat from the air. Typically they say down to 30 degrees, 28 degrees, something like that, where it can pull that heat that's out of in the air and use that to heat your home or the space that you're in. There's a water source and there's also a ground source, and those are typically thought of as a geothermal, where it's using the temperature from down in the ground. And I know Brian is here, and I imagine a few of the other HVAC people have some experience in that. I have ground source geothermal in the house that we live in, so I do know some about that I can answer questions about that as well. Some other types of electric heat. There's a ceiling cove that we don't often see in residential. It's probably more of a commercial, and that is a heat that's a radiant heat. And that heats objects rather than the air. There's convection heat, which is the heat is there, and there's the natural convection where the laws of thermodynamics say that hot air rises. So a convection type heat is typically something that's kept down at the floor and allows the temperature to rise up from there. A radiant heat can be down at the lower levels, but oftentimes that's something that's up at the top, such as these ceiling coves. There's some types of electric radiant heat that actually are concealed in the ceiling. Some electrical wiring, some film that push the heat down, but the thinking there is since it's not heating the air, it's heating the objects, you don't have to worry as much about those laws of thermodynamics that get involved with it. There's wall heaters, which are much like a little space heater that you'd plug in. That usually that's a type of just convection heat, but sometimes there's a forced air component where as the resistance heat is heating up, there's a little fan behind it that blows the heat out into the space and gets it distributed a bit more efficiently in that way. There's electric floor heat. And that's, I'm not sure if that's actual radiant or if that's resistance, but it's probably a combination of both. If you want to get an idea of how that feels over in this bathroom display, there's a border that you can see in front of the vanities there. There's a section of floor heat underneath that. You won't feel it with your shoes on. You're welcome to take your shoes off and test it, or if you want to bend over and touch it with your hand, you can feel that kind of heat. Generally, that's not a heat that's used for space heating. It's more for comfort. We end up doing it in a fair amount of master bathrooms where people want tile floors, but in this colder weather, that tile doesn't feel real comfortable to your bare feet as you're going about bathroom activities, so it does make it nice. Now, we have electric floor heat in our kitchen and eating area, which is all tile, and that's a pretty good size space, probably about the size of this open wood floor area here. And even though we have it set fairly low, we can feel it when we're there in stocking feet, but what we find is that it does create enough heat that the main thermostat for our geothermal system on that floor doesn't call for heat. So the other rooms tend to stay a bit cooler. So in that way, it is providing the heat for the space in there. Oil, natural gas, and propane are heat sources that the typical way of distributing them is going to be hot air or a hot water. A hot air system is going to have ductwork, and ductwork that distributes it out. We see, I'd say predominantly, people are putting in hot air systems these days because most people want air conditioning. And if you're going to have air conditioning, you need some way to distribute that. There's the conventional box ductwork, I guess you would call it. I'm not sure. That's typically of a larger size. And if you're building from new, that can usually be incorporated in such a way that it doesn't become offensive